Now to Bondi Junction shopping centre, where Premier Chris Minns is walking through and speaking to some of those people that are there as the centre reopens for a day of reflection. None of those stores will be open today, and as we've heard from our reporter Emma Rebelato a little earlier this morning, many of the advertising banners there have got black ribbons of reflection there, and we are seeing, of course, that there has been quite a gathering of people there, gathering in Bondi Junction this morning to reflect and to pay their respects on the 6 people who died in that horrific attack on the weekend, and the 12 others who were injured. And here we see the Premier Chris Minns, as well as the Police Commissioner and a number of other dignitaries there that are gathering as part of these reflections today. And of course, we've been hearing about some of the very touching messages and the notes that have been left outside there. Emma Rebelato has been reporting there and joins us now. Emma, we're just seeing these live pictures of the Premier Chris Minns walking through the shopping centre.
Yeah, you mentioned the touching tributes that have been left just opposite Bondi Junction, Westfields shopping centre, and it's been incredibly moving, incredibly touching. Clearly the events that happened here on Saturday night have really affected a lot of people, whether they are known to the area, where they come here to shop, whether they know someone involved, whether they know one of the 6 victims who were killed, or the heroes that we talk about so often who made such a difference on Saturday, or the workers. But it's clear that this has affected so many people. We've seen that the growing floral tribute, I think, really is a symbol of how people are feeling, not just those people who live here in Bondi, but right throughout Sydney, New South Wales, and across the country as well. It's been really moving to see people pay their respects as well this morning. A lot of people have stopped by, they've laid flowers, they've read some of the notes, and they've paused to remember, and some of them have said prayers and shed a tear as well. It's been incredibly moving to see the effect that this has had on so many people.
Yeah, Emma, and it's hard not to be affected when you're hearing and the people reflecting on how harrowing this news was on Saturday as this was unfolding. And we heard at the same time about extraordinary acts of bravery, and I think it was the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese who made the comment that in the worst of times we saw the best of people, and people that were telling us here on the ABC that they had sent their children away and were running in to help to assist those people that were on the front lines of really supporting those that had been injured. It has been quite extraordinary, hasn't it?
Yeah, it certainly has. We heard from a gentleman who is a surf lifesaver who asked to be, he was locked in a shop when this emergency happened. The shutters came down and he asked to be let back out so he could go and help people. And, you know, the way he described seeing so many victims who were badly injured, it's just simply harrowing. And to hear those stories and to think about the retail workers as well, many of them young, casual workers just going about their normal day of Saturday trade, which, as we know, is extremely busy in so many shopping centres, including this one here at Bondi Junction. To think of what they did, that they shepherded people out of harm's way, they locked the gates, they tried to calm people down, they tried to explain where to go next. And just seeing so many images outside the shopping centre too. I know the one that really struck me was seeing the father with his 2 daughters, and he grabbed sleeping masks and put them over their eyes so they wouldn't see what happened. It's just incredibly tough to think about what so many people have gone through, and I think so many people relate to it. You know, so many of us go out and about shopping on a Saturday, on a weekend. It's just a normal part of our lives, and to think that your life can change in such a dramatic way so suddenly is it's incredibly devastating and confronting for a lot of people. And I know a lot of people as well have reflected on Ashley Good, who handed her little child to a stranger to save her child when she was so badly injured, and of course she died in hospital soon after. so many people can relate and have really been affected by that. They have children and, you know, they put themselves in that moment. It's incredibly difficult, and I know this is going to be a really difficult day here as well. So as you mentioned, Premier Chris Minns is here. He will walk through and he will go to a space that's been designated as a space of reflection for the community. The Police Commissioner, Karen Webb, is here as well, as is the Westfields CEO. So they'll be going to that area and they'll be paying tribute there. And then at 11 o'clock, so in just a short amount of time, the doors will open to Westfield. Staff will be able to guide people through and people will be able to pay their respects and take a moment to reflect on what has happened as well. They can lay flowers if they choose to do. And there's also going to be mental health counsellors here. We know that it's going to be incredibly important for people to seek help if they need to during this time.
Yeah, and so important to have those conversations. As you mentioned, this has been extraordinarily harrowing for so many people that were there and that have seen it. Now, a short time ago, Emma, the opposition leader Peter Dutton was at Bondi Junction in Sydney to pay respects to the victims of Saturday's attack. Here's what he had to say.
The emotion's still raw for many local members of the community who were impacted directly or indirectly. I want to say thank you very much to Kelly for her bravery as a local member and the way that she's provided support to local residents here, also to Richard and Andrew Bragg, who are here today as well, important leaders in the local community. It's striking when you look among the flowers there and the bouquets and the beautiful messages to see the teddy bears that sit among the flowers, and obviously when you see an attack like this, it's repugnant enough that people are targeted, but in the case where women are targeted or children are the victims, there's a particular chord that strikes in the community. So I'm honoured to be here today to pay respect to those who have lost their lives, to honour the very many brave acts, and to be part of the healing process and the unifying process that must happen for our country after a period of grief and horror like this. And most importantly, at the moment, our thoughts and prayers are with those who are still in hospital or recovering from the physical and mental scars that will, in many cases, take a lifetime to heal. So to all of those family and friends and all of those who have really been particularly impacted, we send our very warm and heartfelt wishes to them as well.
And that was the opposition leader, Peter Dutton there, Emma, the Premier Chris Minns inside. A lot of dignitaries there today, but you've also been speaking to and listening to so many from the community who are just gathering, who are themselves trying to make sense of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of them will be coming here when the doors open at 11 o'clock as well at Bondi Junction to pay their respects. There's also going to be a vigil at Bondi Beach on Sunday evening at 5:30, a candlelight vigil. And I think that's going to be really important for the community to come together in one moment and to really come together, a moment of silence to pause and reflect on what's happened. And of course, beyond what we're seeing here and on Sunday, there are plans for a permanent memorial. Westfield will be talking to the victims' families, so they want something that they will be appreciative of. They want to make sure that this is respectful and honours the 6 people who died in this attack, as well as the survivors and those heroes that we've been talking about. So as I mentioned, the doors here at Bondi Junction will open at 11 a.m, close at 5 p.m. today. It'll be a very busy day here, I'm sure, and very confronting for many people.
Yeah, most definitely. Emma Rebellato, thank you. We'll be back with you shortly here on the ABC News Channel.
And they've gone back to the old Aussie format of having a specialist batsman at number 6. So it's putting a lot of pressure on.
ABC Listen, the big app for sport, so you'll never miss the big games. Download for free. Saturday,
How's your weekend going so far?
You're about to spoil it, aren't you?
something is rotten in the south of France.
I tell them you're a bit like a detective.
I'm hugely more important.
2 murders in the space of 24 hours.
Know who the victim is?
He was a pain in the ass.
One blow. That's all it took.
It's very Agatha Christie.
Oh, sod off. We're hoping a glass of rosé and a view of the countryside and take the edge off the horror.
Murder in Provence, Saturday 7:30 on ABC and ABC iView. Shakespeare, the greatest writer who ever lived.
Love, anger, melancholy. Who's ever done it better?
From his plays, we piece together his life story.
Because it is so personal.
The grief of losing a child.
London is dangerous. I think Shakespeare wanted to take risks, little pokes at the people in power.
It's very, very personal.
Shakespeare, Rise of a Genius, Tuesday 9:30. Or stream the full season on ABC iView.
Grace, I've just seen your father. Did you know he was coming back?
They can't stop you from teaching. You haven't done anything.
You aware of the allegations against him?
After the Party starts Sunday, April 28 on ABC TV and ABC iView.
Have you caught up with the latest news? It's super easy with ABC News Online.
The Weather Bureau has issued several warnings.
Stories from your neighbourhood, around the country and from overseas.
There's a frantic search for survivors still underway.
For sport, weather, lifestyle and more. Download the ABC News app and get alerts on your phone. Visit the ABC News website. And for stories straight to your inbox, subscribe to one of our newsletters. All the latest, all verified, all the time. Stay in the know with ABC News.
Today, the doors open at Bondi Junction shopping centre for a day of reflection following Saturday's deadly stabbing attack. A man charged in connection to a riot in Sydney's west. Student debt set to soar more than 4% for almost 3 million Australians. And Port Adelaide forward Jeremy Finlayson back in hot water after expressing frustration over his suspension for making a homophobic slur. Hello and welcome to Mornings. I'm Dan Borsha. Taking a look at the weather in the capital cities. In Brisbane, showers developing and possibly a storm. For Sydney, a shower or two, partly cloudy for Canberra. In Melbourne, showers increasing for Hobart, a shower or two. Cloudy in Adelaide, sunny in Perth. And Darwin will have a shower or two developing with a top of 34. The doors at Bondi Junction shopping centre are opening for a day of reflection after Saturday's deadly stabbing attack. Emma Rebelato is at Westfields and joins us now. Emma, tell me what the scene is like there right now.
Well, we're just waiting for the New South Wales Premier Chris Minns. He's gone inside the centre along with the New South Wales Police Commissioner Karen Webb and the CEO of the Centre Group, which owns Westfield in Australia. They've gone in before the public goes in to this space that's been set aside inside the centre for this reflection. So people can come here from now right up until 5 o'clock this evening to pay their respects, to have floral tributes. And I understand the Premier is just walking in now along with the Westfield CEO and the Police Commissioner as well. So they'll be going and paying their respects before the public is allowed inside. So Westfield has said this is going to be a quiet space that people can lay flowers if they want to. There'll be mental health workers there to, if people want to talk, because as we know, this is an extremely difficult situation for so many people. I think a lot of people will want to come here today to pay their respects, even though it will be really difficult and really confronting for a lot of people. So we've seen a lot of dignitaries here today, including earlier we saw the opposition leader Peter Dutton. He laid some flowers and he took a moment to write in the condolence book in Oxford Street, just opposite where we are now, just down the road. And we've seen that sea of flowers just grow every day with really personal messages and notes to those affected. This is what Mr Dutton had to say.
Apologies, we don't seem to have those comments to hand, Emma, but the opposition leader certainly passing his condolences on and reflecting deeply on this tragedy. Can you give us a sense of what's in store for today?
Okay, so today, as I mentioned, the doors have now opened to the public, so people can go in to pay their respects, to lay floral tributes, to take a moment to pause. There will be mental health services there. There are also plans for a permanent memorial. Westfields says it wants to do that in consultation with the victims' families. Now, those family members, some of them chose to come here a couple of days ago. The CEO of the Centre Group of Westfield Australia, he joined those family members. He said it was an incredibly emotional day, and I think that emotion has really touched so many people. Now, we do have that comment from the opposition leader, Peter Dutton. Let's go to that now.
When you see an attack like this, it's repugnant enough that people are targeted, but in the case where women are targeted or children are the victims, there's a particular chord that strikes in the community.
So in occasions like this, often we turn to the leaders of our community for guidance, and they're the ones who are setting up these vigils and these memorials. Let's hear from Allegra Spender, the federal MP, and also the Mayor of Waverley Council. They've been speaking with local members of the community, and also they're dealing with this themselves. Here's what they had to say earlier this morning.
So I think it is really important that Westfield has opened like today in this very gentle way so people can, walk through and I think in a solemn way acknowledge in that space what has happened as we try and find ways, I think, to cope with this and to work out what is life like after that.
We are a community that is in very deep grief. So we've gone from shock to disbelief to now grief. And it's going to take quite a time for people to be able to process. And having this day of reflection in Westfields is going to be a significant part of that journey of reconciling the grief, but more importantly, starting to reclaim what was a significant community hub that was considered to be a very safe place, because Waverley is a safe place, to really take that back, to reclaim that.
So the doors will stay open till 5 o'clock this evening for people to come and pay their respects. No shops are open for trade today. However, tomorrow they can reopen if they choose to. Now, this, of course, is going to be very difficult for many of those workers who were on shift on Saturday when this horrible attack happened. Westfield has said it is waiving the rents for all these traders for this past week where they have been closed. And beyond today and tomorrow, when trade will resume, on Sunday there's going to be a candlelight vigil at Bondi Beach from 5:30 p.m. People are being asked to bring a candle but not to bring flowers because they want the floral tributes to remain here in the heart of Bondi. So that will be incredibly difficult as well, but no doubt one that many community members will want to come together to pay their respects and grieve together as well.
Yeah,
Dan?
Most certainly. Emma Rebelato reporting from Bondi. Thank you. And a warning, our next report discusses suicide and contains distressing details. A family is mourning the death of a 10-year-old Indigenous boy who took his own life while he was under the care of Western Australia's Department of Communities. His parents had not seen their son in 8 months and were working towards being reunited with their child. Reporter Dana Zadvina joins us now from Perth. Dana, what more can you tell us about this tragedy?
Dan, there are a few details that I can tell you for legal reasons, but also because the department says it's unable to provide any more information, and that's because it's against the law to publish the identity or details that might lead to the identification of a child in WA state care. What I can tell you is, as you said, the parents of the boy say they haven't seen him for 8 months and were working to be reunited with him, and he was in the care of relatives when he died on Saturday night. Now, the boy and a number of his other siblings were placed in state care around 2 years ago, and that's another detail that I can tell you. Last year, there were around 5,000 children in the care of the state in WA. More than 3,000 children were Aboriginal. The department hasn't answered any of the ABC's questions in relation to the 10-year-old's death, and they say they can't comment on individual cases. The family has had some support from suicide prevention advocate Jerry Georgatos, and he says they're in disbelief, they're distressed, and they just cannot believe what has happened.
The family's distressed, devastated, and were at the mortuary yesterday to see their young one for the first time. They hadn't seen the child in 8 months.
And there will be a coronial inquest, as with any death in state care.
Dana Zedva reporting. And for viewers who may have found this report confronting, there are helplines where you can go for support. Lifeline is staffed 24 hours a day and can be reached on 13 11 14, and 13 Yarn is another crisis support line set up specifically to support Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. That's on 13 92 76. A toddler is in a critical condition after being hit by a truck south of Brisbane. Authorities say the vehicle struck the child's stroller as the woman was pushing it in Browns Plains about 8:30 this morning. The toddler has been taken to hospital with serious head injuries. The forensic crash unit is investigating, and anyone with footage of the incident is being urged to contact police. We'll bring you more details as they come to hand here at the ABC News channel. The bishop, who was injured in a terror attack at a church in Sydney's southwest, has spoken this morning. Reporter Jessica Rendell has more.
Bishop Mari Emmanuel has broken his silence. He says that he's doing fine, he's recovering quickly, and he's also asking his followers not to be worried or concerned. He's condemned the violence that took place outside the church following his stabbing, and he's asked people to be law-abiding citizens and to cooperate with police and respect the law. Now, I'll just read to you a quote from what he said this morning. He's asked his followers to act Christ-like. He says that Lord Jesus never taught us to fight or retaliate, never said an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth, and never return evil with evil but evil with good. So some strong condemnation of the violent riots that we saw outside the church there. Interestingly, he also forgave the alleged attacker, and we have a clip of him doing so to play for you now. Take a listen.
I forgive whoever has done this act, and I say to him, you're my son, I love you, and I will always pray for you. And whoever sent you to do this, I forgive them as well.
Now, the church has also condoned the incidents that took place outside in this video message. They say a large contingent of people present during these riots were not members of the church, and they're calling for peace and calling for calm.
Yeah. And Jess, police have made the first arrest in relation to those riots that broke out following the stabbing.
They have. So yesterday they executed a search warrant on a home in Doonside and have arrested a 19-year-old man. He's since been charged with 2 offences. One is riot or affray. A second one is destroy or damage property during a public disorder. Now, he's one of many people that are expected to be charged over these riots. Police have set up strike force dribs to try and locate and identify people. We know there's a lot of footage of the incident. News crews were out there pretty quickly. There was also Pole Air helicopters up that were filming and monitoring the incident too. So police will go through this footage, identify these offenders. We know that many police vehicles were damaged during these riots, and police officers were also badly injured. So many charges are expected to be laid in the coming days, but also the 16-year-old alleged attacker is also expected to be charged in the coming days. Police are still finalising those charges. We know that these are expected to be very serious offences, as it was labelled a terrorist attack, Dan.
And a clarification on that report, the church affected has condemned, not condoned, what happened. The federal government's long-awaited national defence strategy has been released and includes plans to lift spending to around $100 billion by 2034. But funding for several programs will be shifted to other priorities. Political reporter Monty Bovell has more.
Well, it was released by the Defence Minister Richard Marles yesterday. The big headline figure in this is that the government will be spending an extra $50 billion over the next decade on defence. That means that Australia's overall military budget will be almost doubling by 2034. Now, we know that there will be various different priorities or programs that will be put on the sidelines as a result of this strategy. That includes the Joint Strike fighter aircraft. That money will be shifted to other priorities, including more money for long-range missiles. We also know some infrastructure spending on some defence facilities here in Canberra will be shifted to help build up the bases in Northern Australia, including in places like Darwin and in Townsville. Now, we have heard from the Defence Minister, Richard Marles, this morning. He says that this is a significant boost in funding, not only right now, but also in the years ahead. Here's what he had to say.
Contributing to the collective security of the region in which we live, making sure that we can protect our sea trade, our sea lines of communication, is at the heart of the job of what our Defence Force needs to be doing going into the future. And to do that in a way where we need to be much more self-reliant, where we need to be much more capable as a country, really does require a transformation of our defence capability, which is why we are increasing defence spending in the way that we are.
Now, that was the Defence Minister, Richard Marles there. We have heard from the Coalition regarding this strategy. They say that the Defence Force will be weaker as a result of this strategy. They've pledged to commit to more money for the Defence Force if they do form government in the future. We also know that there are recruitment and retention problems for the Defence Force, and we have heard from Richard Marles about how that might be overcome. We know that Australia may look to other countries and non-citizens to join the Australian Defence Force. Richard Marles says countries that would be considered include the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and New Zealand. So there's certainly a lot to unpack from this strategy.
Australian Federal Police have been involved in a global cybercrime operation that has arrested 39 people, including 5 in Australia. The operation saw the takedown of a cybercrime platform lab host, which the AFP alleges was being used by cybercriminals to steal personal information from thousands of victims around the world, including more than 94,000 people in Australia. The cybercrime platform was marketed as a one-stop shop for phishing people's information. The AFP says those who have used the platform to steal data should not expect to remain anonymous.
A Melbourne man and an Adelaide man, who police allege were lab host users, were arrested during the warrants and charged with cybercrime-related offending. 3 Melbourne men were also arrested by Victoria Police and charged with drug-related offences. This is a significant disruption of the lab host infrastructure and the criminals' ability to operate using this service. This means that criminals who attempted to view the fraudulent websites were instead met with a black screen displaying only law enforcement logos, sending the warning that their criminal operations had been disrupted.
The owners of a wellness retreat in Clunes near Ballarat has shared her deep sorrow and shock following the death of a 53-year-old woman. It's understood Rachel Dixon consumed a drink made with mushrooms before she died. Here's reporter Sian Valence.
Well, detectives will now begin interviewing everybody involved, both those who were at the private event and the first responders. The alarm was raised just before midnight on Saturday. Reports of a woman who was unconscious and unresponsive. We understand locals arrived first and performed CPR until paramedics arrived. They tried for another half an hour or so, but sadly 53-year-old Ringwood North mum Rachel Dixon couldn't be saved. Now, there have been tributes pouring out for her online, remembering her as a loving and caring woman. It's understood she was at a private event and that she and others had just ingested a drink that was made with mushrooms. Police are waiting for the result of a post-mortem to find out whether or not that contributed to her death, but it hasn't at this point been ruled out. Now, the owner of Solbarn has released a statement online. She's expressed her deep sorrow and shock at what happened. She said it was a private event and none of her staff were there, but that Solbarn will stay closed until police finished their investigation. This all happened in Clunes near Ballarat. It is a small town, only around 1,700 people. They are now rallying together. This is the latest in a long line of tragedies they've had to face. It comes just weeks after 23-year-old local Hannah Maguire was allegedly murdered. They are coming together, but the Mayor has said the Shire is offering free counselling to the community as they try to endure yet another tragedy.
The ABC can reveal some bad news for the almost 3 million Australians with student debt, with forecasts showing it'll increase by more than 4%. HECS debts rise each year according to inflation, but the soaring cost of living has meant the highest rises in decades. Here's National Education and Parenting reporter Connor Duffy.
At university campuses, the cost of living crisis is already hitting hard, with rising rents and food prices, and now the annual indexation to student loans is quickly approaching. Among those feeling that the debts are rising faster than they can pay them off is Amy Jolliffe. The psychology graduate has a HECS debt of $64,000 and is so despondent about the future, she's thinking of leaving Australia and falling back on her hobby.
I feel like I could just get on a plane and fly to Mexico and become a scuba diving instructor and just live my dream and leave this behind me, like leave my country behind me and all my study and all my hopes, all my dreams, everything I've worked for.
Now new figures reveal it could get worse soon. The Greens commissioned the Parliamentary Library to crunch the numbers on this year's indexation number, and it's come back with a figure between 4.2 and 4.8%. That would be the second biggest rise in the last decade and mean that over Labor's time in office, HECS debts could have increased by more than 16%.
Someone with an average debt of $26,000 will face a rise of $4,000 in their debt in just the first term of the Labor government.
The government's flagged that relief could be on the way. It's commissioned a higher education review, which also called for indexation relief for students. Education Minister Jason Clare has said the government's response could come as soon as next month's budget.
We hear a lot about a 4-day work week, but what about a 4-day school week? Well, one high school in the New South Wales Southern Highlands is trialling a single day of remote learning each week. Here's reporter Tim Fernandez.
Sheridan Connolly's Monday school day looks a little different to most students. Instead of travelling an hour and a half each way to classes, she spends her Mondays learning from home.
Because I can spend that either studying or catching up on sleep or, just spending it in a way that works for me.
She's one of more than 100 senior students involved in the trial at Chevalier College in the New South Wales Southern Highlands.
A 4-day week, it's not a 4-day week. Like the Monday, you still get allocated work that you have to do. There's still set work.
When the trial was announced last year, some parents were concerned about the impact it could have on their children's education. But Sheridan's mother, Laura, supports the experiment.
Isn't it great to have kids leaving school that can already hit the ground running, so to speak, and can actually embrace hybrid working or hybrid studying?
The school is one of a number across the country adopting flexible learning as a way to set kids up for life after school.
Schools like ours often have quite a big dropout rate once kids get to university because they have been spoon-fed, using that old terminology, and they haven't had to be self-directed.
The research evidence is very clear that the instruction time, in other words, how long children spend in school, how long their school days or school years are, has very little to do with the actual quality of the learning outcomes.
And it's not just students who are seeing the benefits.
I've been able to, on my Mondays, co-plan with colleagues. I've been able to have time to myself to actually do core business.
The feedback from students, teachers and parents has been mostly positive. Chevalier College believes other schools would benefit from flexible learning, which it claims is the future of education.
It's exciting to be part of a possible solution to that, to actually see that there are potential ways for us to use our time in a better way.
The school will decide whether to adopt flexible learning permanently at the end of the year, turning the page on a new chapter for students, parents and teachers. Tim Fernandez, ABC News, Bowral.
Port Adelaide forward Jeremy Finlayson is back in hot water after expressing frustration over his 3-match suspension for an on-field homophobic slur. Reporter Bethany Alderson has more details from Adelaide.
It was only just over a week ago that Jeremy Finlayson was handed a 3-match ban by the AFL for making a homophobic slur towards an opponent during Port's win over Essendon in round 4. During that game, Finlayson made the remark aware to his club and also apologised to the victim after the final siren. When he was handed the suspension, the AFL said the ban would have been longer if it hadn't been for Finlayson's admission and apology over the incident. But he's now had to clarify after he made further comments when he addressed the sanction on an episode of his wife Kelly Finlayson's podcast, which was released on Tuesday. Now, during that episode, he was talking on a regular segment in which hosts and guests highlight their good, bad and offensive talking points for the week. And in that episode, he said, quote, "My offensive is it pissed me off that I got a 3-week suspension." Now, the podcast episode has already been edited to remove Finlayson's comments. He released a statement yesterday saying that he has no issue with the sanction and that he should have been clearer that he was upset over the actions that led to the penalty. He said that he should have explained that he was bitterly disappointed over what he said to the Essendon player. Now, as part of his penalty, Finlayson will also have to attend a Pride in Sport training program, which he will pay for, and he won't play another game now until his side showdown against the Crows in 2 weeks' time.
Vote counting has begun in Solomon Islands after the Pacific Island nation went to the polls yesterday. But it's going to be several weeks before it's clear who will be the next Prime Minister and whether the incumbent Manasseh Sogavare can hold on to power. Here's Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedjets.
Now we get a rather long and potentially laborious process where, first of all, votes are counted. Now, that could take maybe a week, potentially up to even 2 weeks, because there are 3 separate levels of government, at least to an extent, which are essentially going to the polls simultaneously. So that's going to take a while. After that, there's potentially an even longer process, which is these shifting and sometimes unpredictable negotiations between the successful MPs to try and work out who is in the best position to form a government. Now, again, that could take some time. Last time it took about 3 weeks or so. So all in all, I mean, it's difficult to make predictions, but we could easily be waiting potentially up to a month or even longer, perhaps even up to 6 weeks or so, before we work out or before we can know with any certainty whether it will be Manasseh Sogavare successfully defending his crown and coming back as Prime Minister of Solomon Islands, setting a new historical precedent, or whether someone else might come through the middle and replace him.
And what are the chances, Stephen, that Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare can actually hold on to power?
Look, Dan, it's really difficult to say because there are so many variables here. The first thing Mr Sogavare has to do is win his own constituency in East Choisehill, which is something which he's always done very easily. He is facing a little bit more of a stiff challenge, we're hearing this time around, from a local who's actually the son of the man that he got rid of a long time ago, or who he defeated a long time ago. Now, it's difficult, because we're not on the ground there, to know for sure just how serious this challenge is, but we should see results from that constituency relatively soon in the count. But if Mr Sogavare is successful, as most still expect he will be, then he's probably going to start as at least a narrow favourite to come through again as Prime Minister. But there are all sorts of variables here. The first one is how strong is his showing within the Our Party. If he comes back with, say, 20 or so people who are at least notionally aligned to him, then he's probably in a pretty strong position to once again be Prime Minister. But if it's a weaker showing than that, then he looks a little bit more vulnerable, and perhaps other contenders, including the former Prime Minister Gordon Darcy-Lilo, who's standing here in central Honiara, or perhaps one of his key lieutenants, maybe they might emerge as an alternative contender. So it's difficult to say. It'll depend not just how strong his result is, but how good Mr Sogavare is at holding those key lieutenants and other supporters close to him to stop them being induced away by other potential contenders. It's going to be shifting, it's going to be potentially a bit treacherous, it's going to be subtle. It will be a fascinating, slow-moving political crescendo over the next few weeks. But look, it won't be any sort of result anytime soon. This will take some time to work through.
Yes, so much at play. And Stephen, you've been speaking to people on the ground in Honiara. Is there the mood of change which we sometimes see at elections? And I guess, what are the top priorities for most voters?
Look, it does feel like there's a mood for change here in central Honiara. Most people we spoke to were pretty cynical about Manasseh Sogavare. Now, I hasten to add, this is just a straw poll, right? There's nothing scientific about this, but the broad feeling here in central Honiara was that Gordon Darcy Lilo, the alternative potentially to Mr Sogavare standing here, is in a pretty strong position. And Mr Sogavare's stocks in the capital, at least from the people we spoke to, didn't seem very high. But that, of course, doesn't necessarily mean that he won't get back in, because what matters is not what happens here in Honiara, but what happens across the whole country and how strongly Mr Sogavare's candidates perform in all of those constituencies spread all across the whole archipelago. And it's entirely possible that Mr Sogavare might not be personally popular across the islands and yet still get enough candidates who have enough stock and standing locally to inch across the line. Now, what are voters talking about? Well, very few people, unsurprisingly, are talking about geopolitics directly or the role of China in Solomon Islands, although it does crop up from time to time. The main focus, unsurprisingly, though, for most people are really, the degraded state of health and education services, particularly outside of Honiara, but also here in the capital as well. Really poor health services, the central hospital still in a terrible state, problems with the roads, sanitation, water, basic infrastructure. The opposition's been campaigning hard on that. Whether people believe that they're capable of doing a better job on those core bread and butter issues will really determine how successful they are, I think, at this election.
And now time for the weather. Here's Nate Byrne.
Keeping an eye on eastern Australia at the moment, you can see a little bit of cloud picking up already. There's an upper level trough helping to cause some widespread showers and storms. For most of us, though, this high pressure system is keeping things clear, though we do have a weak frontal system just making it into the southeast. That'll carry some showers. Meanwhile, over in WA in the north, we've got plenty of warmth and some gusty winds too. They'll cause some extreme fire danger for the Headland district, and then a broad area of high fire danger around that for your Thursday. In terms of rainfall, it'll really be all eyes on the east this afternoon. Northeastern New South Wales, southeastern Queensland will get a big burst of wet weather, maybe severe thunderstorms. We could be talking large falls, large hail and also some damaging winds. So keep an eye out for warnings there. In fact, Brisbane will see showers developing, maybe with a late storm. 28 will be your top. Most of it's happening a little bit further inland. For Sydney, a couple of showers, 24 for you. It's aiming for 21 in Canberra, a fine day there. Melbourne, a couple of showers increasing through this afternoon as that weak front comes in. 17 will be the top, and Hobart will cop a shower or two out of that as well. 19 there. Adelaide's getting to 19 as well, although it's dry, it will be pretty cloudy. Perth, sunny, 33 your top, and up north Darwin's mostly fine. We will see some showers developing though. 34 will be the maximum. Through the outlook, we've got a few things to keep an eye on. First of all, in the east, this wet and stormy weather moves on pretty quickly, but then another upper trough coming in will help bring a second burst of showers and storms, and then it'll be all eyes to the north as a low pressure system in the Gulf of Carpentaria potentially develops. We could be talking about a cyclone later in the week, a little bit quite late in the cyclone season, but we're still in it at least until the end of April. So some decent falls for the north. Even if it doesn't get to cyclone strength, we'll see showers increasing across Queensland's north. And then for the southeast of the state, we could see some really decent totals over the week ahead. Flooding continues for the south of that state into northern New South Wales. Minor to moderate, but it'll be one to watch. Tomorrow, though, things will have dried up for Brisbane. You've got a fine day. Some more showers for Sydney, maybe some in Canberra as well. Melbourne showers will be easing. We'll see some falls around Adelaide. Hobart and Perth staying fine, and up top, Darwin should be dry as well, getting to 35.
Here are the top stories on ABC News. Bondi Junction shopping centre has reopened this morning for a day of community reflection following Saturday's deadly stabbing attack. New South Wales Premier Chris Minns and State Police Commissioner Karen Webb visited the centre to view the memorial and write their condolences. There will be no retail trade, but people will be able to visit the centre to pay their respects to those that lost their lives. A teenager has been charged over a violent riot in Sydney's West. The demonstration was sparked after a 16-year-old boy allegedly stabbed a bishop and a priest during a mass at an Assyrian Orthodox church at Wakely on Monday night. Police raided a home at Doonside yesterday, arresting a 19-year-old man over the incident. 2 officers were injured in the riot and several police cars were damaged. HECS debts for nearly 3 million Australians could surge 4.8% due to indexation, according to fresh figures from the Parliamentary Library. In a statement, Education Minister Jason Clare says the federal government will respond to a review of higher education, which recommends making HECS simpler and fairer. And Port Adelaide forward Jeremy Finlayson has clarified comments he made expressing frustration over his 3-match suspension for making a homophobic slur. He now says he has no issue with the sanction and should have been clearer that he was upset by his actions, which led to the penalty. Time to check in on the business news. Here's Sam Yang. And the labour force data for March has just been released. What did it say, Sam?
Hi, Dan. So the unemployment rate for March rose to 3.8%. That's according to the latest data being released by the Bureau of Statistics. Of course, that's seasonally adjusted. So the market had previously predicted the unemployment rate would rise to 3.9% in March. So today's data came in a little softer than expected. So we saw the unemployment rate tumbled back to 3.7% over the month of February, and that's because of shock jobs growth over that period, and more than 110,000 jobs were created over that month, which was the biggest monthly jobs gain outside of the pandemic period. Now, in March, we saw a job loss of around 7,000 compared to that the 10,000 jobs growth estimated by a Reuters poll. So that's a bit of a surprise there, and the participation rate pretty much steady at 66.6%. Now, the ABS says the small drop in employment in March followed a larger than usual flow of people into employment in February, following smaller than usual flows in December and January. However, in March, the flows into employment had returned to a more usual pattern. And for more clarity, let's bring in an economist. Let's bring in Catherine Birch, senior economist from ANZ. Hi, Catherine. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Sam.
So a bit of a surprise there in terms of jobs growth. So do you think this is a bit of a readjustment after the volatility we've seen in jobs numbers in the past few months?
Yes, it might be a little bit sort of coming back a touch after we saw that very, very strong employment growth number in February. But when you look at the details, there's actually still some positives to take away. So the fall in employment was due to a decline in part-time employment, whereas full-time employment actually rose quite strongly again. That pushed hours worked up and the underemployment rate down as well. So, overall, there are still some positives to take out of this data.
So 3.8%, it's still at a historically low level. Does it mean the labour market is still on the tight side and the interest rates will stay higher for longer?
Look, the labour market still is very tight, and I think the 3.8% today is quite low relative to what the RBA has forecast. So for the average in the June quarter, they're forecasting unemployment would rise to 4.2%. And given the data today, it doesn't look like it will get there. So the labour market is still very, very tight and putting upward pressure on wage growth. So, the data today doesn't change our expectation around the RBA. We're still expecting that rate cuts would start in November this year. To see earlier rate cuts, you'd probably need to see the labour market deteriorating quite quickly. And again, it doesn't look like that's happening, particularly when the level of job ads, including on the ANZ Indeed jobs measure, the ABS job vacancies data, they're still showing that labour demand is still quite elevated. Employers are finding it easier to get workers, but it's still quite a bit harder than it was pre-pandemic. The inflation data out next week is going to be quite important for the timing of that start of the rate cut cycle.
Do you expect the unemployment rate to slowly increase over this year? And where do you think the rate is going?
Yes, we're still only expecting a gradual rise in the unemployment rate, sort of getting to a peak of around 4.5%. Now, that would be, over 1 percentage point higher than the trough that we saw a couple of years ago, but still quite low on a historical basis, still lower than that 5% that we were seeing before the pandemic. And at 4.5%, it's still going to be quite tight. Most people who want a job will either have one or be able to find one fairly quickly, and that should contribute to ongoing resilience in the economy.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that you are expecting the first rate cut around November from the RBA. What level does the unemployment rate need to reach to concern the RBA so that it will need to start cutting rates earlier?
Look, they'd probably need to see a few months of higher unemployment as well, and it would probably need to exceed their forecast track too. So I think, as I mentioned, they're forecasting that the unemployment rate would average 4.2% in the June quarter and then some gradual rises after that. So if we were seeing sort of unemployment getting, rising sharply and getting closer to the 4.5% sooner rather than later, especially if that was due to widespread job losses or a number of months of employment falling, then that would be a bit of a red flag for the RBA, we think.
Catherine Birch, senior economist from ANZ, thank you so much for your insights.
Thanks, Sam.
Hi, Dan. So the unemployment rate for the month of March rose to 3.8% with around 7,000 job losses over that period.
And is there a sense about how the markets are reacting to this news today?
Yeah, so just after the release of the data, we saw that the Aussie dollar has actually fell from 64.4 to 64.3 US dollars, and the Australian share market is still tracking a little higher though, thanks to the rise in iron ore prices pushing the mining sector higher. Let's take a look at the numbers now. The All Ords and the ASX 200 index are up around 0.4% each. Turning across the region now, where the NZ 50 is down around 0.6% at the moment. Nikkei in Japan has opened lower, while markets across China will get underway shortly. Now, in the US, Wall Street has posted its fourth straight day of losses, taking it 4% off its recent record high. The Dow Jones index down 0.1%, the S&P 500 down 0.6%, and the Nasdaq Composite lost 1.2%. Onto commodity markets now. Gold prices are still surging, while crude oil prices are mixed. And the Australian dollar is a little stronger against the greenback. It's buying around 64.3 US cents. And Dan, that's finance.
Thanks, Sam. Well, there have been chaotic scenes in Queensland Parliament after a bipartisan committee tasked with tackling youth crime dissolved after they were unable to agree on a final report. Here to tell us more is Brisbane reporter Michael Reddy.
It sure was a fiery debate, and really this is a bit of a debacle what's going on at the moment, because we've got this bipartisan committee which was tasked with dealing with youth crime here in Queensland. It was formed in October of last year, and they can't work together. They can't get through the interim report to try and deal with youth crime in the state of Queensland. So over a 6-month period, a lot of work has gone into this. In fact, this committee has been all over the state of Queensland, been in Townsville, Cairns, Mount Isa, done countless different reports. And if you look at some of the numbers, 26 meetings, 13 public hearings, 9 public briefings, 220 submissions. But the committee has been dissolved because they cannot come to an agreement on this interim report. And so what was in this interim report was 60 recommendations, and according to one LNP member, only about 1/3 of that has been dealt with so far. So they're only about 1/3 of the way through a report which was meant to be tabled to Parliament on the 12th of April. So it's really disappointing for those the advocates for victims of crime as well. In fact, I've been texting this morning with Ben Cannon. He's from Voice for Victims. He sent me a text back saying, once again, Queenslanders have been let down by government officials who find their own needs more important than those they are elected to represent. Victims, once again, have been let down. So Dan, today is the last sitting day of Parliament. It'll be interesting to see what the government has to say about how they are going to move forward from this and what they're going to do to try and deal with youth crime in Queensland.
There's more pressure on Boeing. Its safety culture and the quality of the planes it produces has come under scrutiny at 2 US Senate hearings.
Effectively, they are putting out defective airplanes.
Boeing has been in crisis mode since part of a panel blew off a 737 MAX jetliner during an Alaska Airlines flight in January. No one was injured, but it led to thousands of flight cancellations and inspections. In Washington, witnesses testified about missing records surrounding the mid-air incident, along with production concerns over 2 separate Boeing wide-body jets. An engineer turned whistleblower said he was ignored when he raised his concerns.
I was told to shut up. I received physical threats. My boss said I would have killed someone who said what you said in a meeting. And then this is not a safety culture when you get threatened by bringing issues of safety concerns.
The US regulator, the Federal Aviation Authority's oversight of Boeing, has also been criticised at the hearings. That's after 2 deadly crashes involving 737 MAX aircraft in Indonesia in 2018 and in Ethiopia the following year. 346 people were killed.
The world is shocked to learn about Boeing's current production quality issues. I'm not surprised because nothing changed after the 2 crashes. There was no accountability. Not a single person from Boeing went to jail. Hundreds of people died, and there's been no justice. Unless action is taken and leaders are held accountable, every person stepping aboard a Boeing airplane is at risk.
Boeing wasn't represented at the hearing. The company has disputed the claims surrounding the structural integrity of the popular Dreamliner 787. It says testing hasn't found any fatigue cracks in hundreds of in-service jets. In light of the Alaska Airlines incident, Boeing has been trying to reassure authorities and the general public that its planes are safe.
We believe in our airplanes. We feel safe airplanes. Our people do. We have confidence in the safety of our airplanes, and that's what all of this is about. And we fully understand the gravity.
But that's not enough for members of an expert panel that found serious flaws in Boeing's safety culture. It's outlined 50 recommendations to address issues at the company.
There exists a disconnect, for lack of a better word, between the words that are being said by Boeing management and what is being seen and experienced by employees across the company. They hear safety is our #1 priority, but what they see is that that's only true as long as your production milestones are met, and at that point, it's push it out the door as fast as you can.
Boeing has been given a 90-day deadline by the FAA to address what have been described as systemic quality control issues. US regulators have put curbs on Boeing's production and deliveries fell by half in March. It's announced a broad management shake-up and the CEO, Dave Calhoun, will go by the end of the year. Thousands of people have taken to the streets after a violent brawl in Georgia's parliament. The former Soviet country is trying to pass a controversial bill that critics argue is authoritarian and replicates Russian laws that are used to crush dissent. Here's Cayman Gok.
Politicians aren't afraid to use their words, but this opposition MP chose to use his fists, raining haymakers down on the parliamentary leader of the ruling Georgian Dream Party. The feed cuts out, but you can still hear the brawl. The political punch-on spills into the corridors of Georgia's parliament, the very place where laws are supposed to be enacted, a scene of chaos and abuse. The fight occurred on Monday over a controversial bill which would require organisations to register as foreign agents if they accept funding from overseas. For 3 nights, thousands have gathered on the streets protesting the law they say is designed to crush dissent.
It's like copy-pasted from similar Russian law against freedom of media, against freedom of organizations.
Riot police were sent in with shields and shotguns to disperse the crowd. Some protesters kicked and beaten by authorities. Georgia's ruling party has pressed on with the bill as it passed its first reading in Parliament. 2 more and it becomes law.
There is no place in Georgia for a Russian law. Europe is the choice of the Georgian people.
It's been widely criticised by the West. Georgia wants to join the European Union, but the bloc has warned this legislation could harm their chances.
They say the law contradicts EU values. In which part? Which point of the law? Why? There are 0 arguments.
The Foreign Agents Bill was first introduced in March last year and then abandoned after violent protests erupted. This time, Georgia's government says it's not backing down. Cameron Gock, ABC News.
Australian travellers have been left stranded as communities across the United Arab Emirates clear up debris. In fact, we're going to take you to Chris Minns, the New South Wales Premier.
Catley in Surrey Hills this morning speaks about several aspects of police investigations and the community coming together over the next few days. Firstly, the Commissioner for Police and myself have just returned from Bondi Junction, Westfields, where centre management are opening up that venue for members of the public. Trading won't take place, but it is an opportunity to reflect as a community on the last week and, most importantly, pay tribute to the 6 people that lost their lives as a result of that terrible and horrifying crime last Saturday. I think that the opportunity to do that as a community is very important. It's the first step in healing. As I've said to a few people this morning, it's not back to normal for Sydney, but this is an opportunity to get some kind of grieving and to turn the page on what's been a very difficult period. And I know many people want to express solidarity and sincere condolences to those that have lost loved ones. There's also a major vigil that will take place at Bondi Beach on Sunday night at 5:30, and we encourage members of the public to come along to that vigil, perhaps not to bring flowers, but to bring a candle to show some community solidarity and send a massive message to the 6 families who've lost loved ones that we're thinking of them, we care for them, and we want them to get through this together. There's been, in the midst of so much violence and anxiety in the community, an overwhelming public response to the suffering of those families, and it's wonderful to see that we are a community that can come together, that we're a community that can stand together in difficult periods and show that that grief is universal when it's felt by one family or one individual. I've also been bowled over by reports of the community rallying around New South Wales Police and the paramedics, as well as hospital staff. This morning I was able to visit Prince of Wales Hospital, the paramedic station at Randwick, as well as Waverley Police Station, and speak to the first responders who went to Bondi Junction to protect the community, to save lives, to ensure that they were doing their job in a diligent and professional way. They exhibited the finest traditions of public service in New South Wales. And as I've said many times, we owe them a huge debt of gratitude. I spoke to young police officers that said for the first time in their careers they were walking down the street in Bondi or Waverley and complete strangers were coming up to them, thanking them for their service to the state and wishing them the best. I'd love to be able to do that 365 days of the year, but it's amazing when we have big traumas and terrible crimes, how much we remember the importance of New South Wales Police and how it's regular people doing an extraordinary job to keep us safe. There's also examples of members of the public. There was the first paramedic on scene on Saturday after the shift was completed, went to the pizza shop to order pizzas for the entire crew. Before he had an opportunity to pay, a young bloke whipped out his card, paid for all the pizzas. When the paramedic asked for his name, he wouldn't give it, and he just walked out the store. I mean, that's sort of quiet gestures of decency for one another, I think hopefully can be the hallmark of what has been a terrible week in New South Wales. I'm going to hand over to the Commissioner for Police in a moment, but I want to speak about social media firms in particular first off. It's still a major concern for New South Wales Police and the government to have so much unsubstantiated rumour as well as graphic content still available on public websites and social media platforms. It proves to be very difficult to foster community cohesion and harmony, to calm down the community, to send messages of unity in a difficult period when social media firms still continue to disseminate terrible pieces of information, untruths, rumours that circulate like wildfire through a febrile and anxious community. We want to work with the Commonwealth Government to close down these pages wherever they eventuate. It's very difficult to do it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday. It's almost impossible at 1 o'clock in the morning when New South Wales Police are attempting to protect religious venues or other parts of the state that are potentially under threat of attack or vandalism because somebody, in a malicious attempt to sow division in our community, has posted an irresponsible message on social media. There's also still, my understanding, the confronting images of the stabbing at Wakeley on Monday night, still available on social media. Now, even the most passionate defenders of social media firms that may argue that it's difficult to take down content in the immediate aftermath of a violent incident, it's pretty hard to defend it considering we're 48 hours after the offence and it's still up, still available. Now, think about what that does to community cohesion. These are unedited images of an alleged crime that are guaranteed to sow division in the community and make passions boil over. Secondly, this is completely inappropriate information available to young people that's just available on the World Wide Web, it's just available on social media. So we want to work with the Commonwealth Government. In my view, this is the antithesis of what we need to bring the community together, and social media firms have a social and moral licence to take down divisive information and graphic content as soon as it becomes available. We're trying to sow together the seeds of division in our community to tamp down a combustible situation. And I think the media in New South Wales, along with the government, the members of political parties have done a good job, certainly religious leaders, but a lot of that good work is undercut if social media spreads information and lies like wildfire. So we want to work with the Commonwealth Government to do something about it. Happy to speak. Happy to turn it over to Commissioner for Police.
Thank you, Premier. Following the events at Wakeley on Monday night, police established 2 strike forces, Strike Force Patrina to deal with the stabbing inside the church and Strike Force Dribs to deal with the riot that ensued following the stabbing. As a response, the police have 70 police officers dealing with the proactive engagement with the community in response to that. That will remain ongoing. Today, we've added a further 10 detectives to the investigative arm of that strike force, taking the number to 42 to deal with the investigation to identify those responsible for the riot. A number of people disguised themselves on that night, and we need to know who they are. People in the community know who they are, their families know who they are, and we need to know who they are. We will continue to investigate this for as long as it takes to identify them. The best thing that the community can do is call Crime Stoppers to let us know who they are. The sooner they're identified and put before the court, then the sooner they can be dealt with. We have some people that have jumped on multiple police cars. One individual has a very distinctive tattoo on his torso of a face, while he has cowardly covered his own face. So we're calling on the public to identify those people and assist police. We believe there are up to 50 people involved that we need to talk to. Last night, police identified and charged a 19-year-old man for being involved in that riot. That individual, whilst coming from the community, wasn't a member of that parish. I have said before, what we did see and anticipated and has been shown is that people just came along to participate in a riot. And that's disgraceful and disgusting. 51 police officers were injured, and thankfully they're recovering from their injuries. And multiple police vehicles were damaged and many remain inoperable, which means police can't respond to calls from the service, calls for service from the community because of those vehicles being out of action. We will work to repair those as quickly as we can, but it's stopping us from doing our job. So we do need the community assistance to identify those people involved in that riot and come forward. The sooner they do that, the sooner we can get this on with. Until then, we will remain committed to this investigation for as long as it takes. As for Strike Force Katrina, the young person remains in hospital and remains a patient of the healthcare system. However, police will and continue to conduct a major investigation concurrently to him being in hospital. And when we have material information to share on the progress of that investigation, we will do so. I'll now hand over to the Minister for Police.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, everybody. Look, the government is very pleased with the actions that...
And that's where we leave viewers on the main channel. We'll continue on the ABC News channel.
In standing up the strike force DRIBs. Can I say that the scenes that we saw on that night were quite unbelievable, and standing up this strike force as swiftly as the police have done are doing two things. We are ensuring that the community is kept safe, and also making sure that those people who were involved in that violent riot are found. The government will make sure that they work hand in glove with the police and provide all the resources they need to keep the community safe and find those people who committed those violent acts. Look, I just want to reiterate what the Commissioner just said, and that is we need your help. Please, if you know any of these people, call Crime Stoppers and let us know. It is critically important that we find who they are and that the police have the opportunity to speak with them and to arrest them if that is what is needed. Thanks.
We're all happy to take questions.
Commissioner, how many individuals have you identified that you may be making arrests of later this week?
Our intention, and as we showed last night, as they're identified, they will be arrested. We arrested one man last night, and we'll continue to work through the identification of those remaining. We think there is up to 50 individuals. There may be more. But as soon as they're identified, they will be arrested.
Is there any indication that this 16-year-old followed any extremist accounts on social media?
That will all be subject to the investigation.
And is there any indication that he might have visited any fringe centres or places of concern?
As I said, I know everyone wants answers, but it is really important. Can I just stress that he has not yet had the opportunity to be spoken to, in fairness to him, and there is a major investigation, and we will update the public as soon as we have more information to share. As I said, he's currently a patient. When the doctors clear him, we will be able to talk to him. Until then, he remains a patient in hospital.
His parents have said that he suffers from what they say are undiagnosed mental health issues without being examined as well.
Of course.
Premier, on the teenage boy, we now know that he has some history with the justice system. Are you concerned, or do you think more could have been done by the justice system and or the health system in regards to this boy before this happened?
Yeah, look, I'm not going to prejudge an inquiry that would take place by New South Wales Police and the government looking at the circumstances relating to that alleged attack. But of course we'll examine it, and if changes can be made, I'll take responsibility for it. But we want to make changes. I think reasonable people in New South Wales would expect that if there's mistakes that have been made, either his previous interactions with education or one of the other government departments, of course we'll look at it closely and make changes. We want to ensure we do everything possible to prevent this from happening again.
Premier, you said earlier that today that you don't want to rush legislative changes on changes to knife laws. Given there's 2 incidents in 3 days, do you think there do need to be changes and they need to be strengthened?
Well, look, they're reasonable questions. We changed knife offences in legislation soon after getting elected to government. So mid last year, legislative changes went through the parliament, doubling the jail term for the maximum penalty for knife offences in New South Wales. We took it out of the Summary Offences Act, we put it in the Crimes Act. We doubled the penalty fines that would be issued by magistrates and judges as a result of knife offences. However, given these very serious criminal attacks in the last week, of course a responsible government would look at the existing legislation and see whether potential changes could help prevent a similar attack. Now, you're not going to get an exact attack in the future, but it's important that we look at how they're applied in practice and whether we can make changes to prevent it from happening again.
What will that look like? Will that be a review, or how are you looking at it?
So a couple of things. Firstly, the Sentencing Council is looking at knife-related offences, and they haven't reported back to government, but of course we await their findings and we'll examine their recommendations to government. Similar to the terrible death of Stephen Toga in another knife-related killing, the government examined the existing laws. We spoke to the New South Wales Police, we gathered information and we made a legislative change. I don't want to prejudge it. We have to ensure that whatever changes, whatever legislative or policy changes that we make actually make a difference, and that's going to take a little bit of time.
Prominent mosques in South West Sydney have said this morning to different outlets they're growing increasingly concerned about the potential rumours circulating about any sort of retaliation tomorrow. Will the police have a visual presence at the mosques in South West Sydney?
We expect a surge from New South Wales Police, and I know the Commissioner has made that clear in the last few days. That's important not just for the immediate security concerns of major religious institutions, churches and mosques, but also that there's a sense of safety and security for those that are seeking solace from churches and mosques over a very difficult period. We fully appreciate that in difficult times when anxieties are high, many people go to the church or the mosque. So we want them to be safe in those institutions with their communities. So there will be a big police presence in Western Sydney. That puts enormous drain on the resources of the New South Wales Police. I just want to make this point. We are lucky that we've got such dedicated, hard-working public servants in the New South Wales Police Force that are prepared to put themselves in difficult situations it's a febrile, anxious environment, but they really are the line that keeps order, safety, and makes people, members of the public, feel secure in a difficult period.
Just on your concern regarding the social media companies,
Yes.
have you spoken to the Commonwealth Government about what options are available to prevent this dissemination?
In the immediate aftermath of the crimes, we spoke directly to the Commonwealth Government about removing specific pages that had become famous, if you like, or infamous for spreading misinformation in the community. We're happy that the Minister for Communications communicated that to the East Safety Commissioner, and some of those pages have been taken down. Now, that might have been direct action from the social media company, or otherwise they're down, which is good news, because in many instances malicious information about damage to mosques and churches was being spread like wildfire and inflaming tensions in the community. I'm still concerned about graphic, violent imagery being available on public domain websites, major websites, 48 hours after the incident had occurred. Like, it might be the case that you sit back and say, well, if someone posts something, maybe you've got to give social media firms a little bit of time to take it down, but we are 48 hours after these alleged criminal offences took place and they're still available. Now, this is dangerous for two reasons. Firstly, it adds to the sense of community disharmony, and secondly, it's completely inappropriate for children. And I think everybody's got a responsibility to not provide graphic imagery to young people who can just access it from their bedrooms and their phones.
Just to follow up Matty's question, I mean, what in your mind would those tough penalties look like?
I heard the Minister for Communications speak this morning about tougher penalties. I think that would be warmly welcomed by the community in New South Wales. I know that we were struggling over the last week with particular websites and pages that, as I said, were spreading lies and disinformation. So if we can prevent or stop or put social media firms on notice that there'll be consequences if you don't take an active management of what's happening on your own websites, that'd be good for the state.
Premier, the Milstein family and prominent figures from the Lebanese Muslim community have been left confused by such a quick terror designation of the attack, especially in the boys 60 and hasn't yet formally been brought to by the police. Do you agree with that sentiment that they have been left confused by why it was such a quick terror designation?
Well, no. I mean, firstly, this is an active major investigation. It does involve a terrorism designation. People, in my view, should allow the New South Wales Police to get on with that job. It's important. Secondly, the designation from the New South Wales Police Commissioner concurred with by the Minister for Police was important, not to rank one crime over another or to give one more prominence over another, but in a legislative sense, in order to access increased powers for New South Wales Police as they were conducting this investigation, a terrorism designation needs to be applied. So, look, they're entitled to their view. They can obviously make public commentary about it, but it's my judgment that the absolute right decision was made, and our primary and first responsibility, particularly after a violent alleged attack, is to keep the community safe.
What about looking to legislate age restrictions on social media like they have around the world?
Look, I'm not going to comment about that right now, but I think a broader discussion about social media access by young people, not just in relation to the last week, but its impact on mental health, on personal images, on how young people feel about themselves is long, long overdue.
I understand last year you spoke to the father of Queensland State Jack Priestley about introducing laws allowing police to use handheld metal detectors to search for weapons. Do you think there's merit in those laws, and can you just confirm those conversations?
Yeah. So yes, that is true. Jack's father. And the Commissioner and I both met with him, actually. We were at the Police Ministers' Council in Brisbane, and our condolences, of course, to he and his wife. Can I just say in New South Wales that you can actually use wands. Police can use wands here in New South Wales now. But look, I think just as the Premier has said, we will look at everything. We will not close the door on anything. We'll have the coronial investigation as well, and the recommendations will come out of that, and of course we will consider those. But in terms of Jack's law, it's early days too in Queensland, as I understand it. Those laws have only been enacted since the 14th of February this year. So in the natural course of things, the Ministerial Council right around the country, we discuss all of these matters when we meet, which will be in just coming weeks, and we will seek an evaluation from them. But it is early days, so we'll keep speaking about that with them, though.
Have you heard the Bishop's message of forgiveness that came out this morning? What do you make of that?
Yeah, big-hearted gesture from the Bishop, and I think that his message, particularly around for Christians, around the importance of forgiveness and the renunciation of violence, is exactly the message that we need to hear in Sydney. I also want to say that gesture was really important, and it was echoed by every major faith and religious leader in the state over the last 48 hours. Major Muslim leaders, the Grand Mufti in New South Wales, as well as Christian leaders renunciating violence in all its forms, whether it's retaliatory violence or the alleged offences that we've seen on Monday night. They're important messages, and it means that any bad actor that's attempting or thinking about acting out is doing it in defiance of the religious leadership of New South Wales, universally condemned by the senior religious leadership of New South Wales.
Just in your opening comments, you mentioned looking at 50 people who may have disguised themselves. You said we need to know who they are, but families and friends know who they are. Is there any suggestion that your investigators are encountering an unwillingness to cooperate and identify who these people are?
No, not necessarily at all. In fact, we've received a large number of reports to Crime Stoppers already, but we're very keen to speak to those that played a major role on Monday night. And as I said, one individual was responsible for damaging a number of police vehicles. So we're very keen to speak to that individual.
Premier, it's been pretty unprecedented week in Sydney. How confident are you that SW will come out with stronger? How confident are you the state?
Yeah. Look, I reckon that's a reasonable question, because there's people in the state. Firstly, there's families that are grieving the loss of innocent lives that have been killed, and they're going to take time to grieve. Secondly, I think the community needs to process what's happened right across Sydney, in the east and the west, over the last 6 days. But I'm very confident that that the best of New South Wales will emerge. And if I could give specific examples of charity, bravery, goodwill to one another. My sense is that this community is strong and united, and the best of New South Wales will be on display in the weeks ahead. Now, that's not me just saying everybody get back to normal. Well, it's not going to be the same for a while, and that needs to be acknowledged. I've spoken to some of the family members who've lost loved ones in the last few days, and I won't go into the specifics of the conversation, but to a person, they've been bowled over and overwhelmed by the fact that Sydney has rallied behind them, and they feel as though they're not alone, and they sense that there's millions of people that are in their corner, and hopefully that can give some small solace in a terribly dark period.
Last couple, guys.
Commissioner, do you believe that officers currently have the requisite tools to deal with knife crime in New South Wales?
Oh yes, certainly. Certainly we've got our own tools, but certainly got the legislation to search those individuals, etc. In fact, we last week ran Operation Foil, which we conduct regularly. It's a knife operation. We seized 51 knives. Now, knife crime is an issue that's been on the agenda across Australia and New Zealand for many months and years now, and it's not new to us. It's been the same globally. But it is a concern, and certainly operations like Operation Foil show that we do take knives from those that shouldn't have them. It's illegal to possess a knife in public.
So you don't need to empower them to be ramped up or legislation?
As I said, I mean, I will work with the government on their review and anything that's suggested, but certainly the powers that we have show that we get results.
Commissioner, I know you mentioned that a lot of the rioters covered their faces, but a lot of them didn't. There's a lot of vision around all of that particular incident. Why has only one been arrested so far?
We've got 600 hours of footage, and we're working through that, but people can expect a knock on the door.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Last
you.
one.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It was New South Wales Premier Chris Minns speaking to media after visiting the Westfields in Bondi Junction, where he paid his respects and wrote a message in the condolence book along with the police commissioner. The Premier pointing out that today's remembrance is important and that it's the first step in healing. He praised the quiet gestures of decency that he's heard about and said it's a major concern to have so much unsubstantiated rumour and graphic content still available on social media, adding that social media firms have a social and moral licence to take down divisive information and graphic content as soon as it becomes available. It proves very difficult to foster community cohesion and harmony, to calm down the community, to send messages of unity in a difficult period when social media firms still continue to disseminate terrible pieces of information, untruths, rumours that circulate like wildfire through an anxious community. He said he wants to work with the Commonwealth Government to close down these pages wherever they eventuate, and that thinks tougher penalties would be warmly welcomed. Chris Minns called for a broader conversation on the impact of social media on mental health, and particularly on young people. And the New South Wales Police Commissioner Karen Webb called for community assistance to identify the people who were there writing, saying that police would react and that there was something like 600 hours of video footage to be viewed by police officers, but that anyone that knows people that